That was a nice warm up.
Yes. See if we can get done by 1. That's the target.
All right. Is
Oh
that a
man,
challenge or?
it's already midnight. What the heck? We
Well, that's my
started
fault.
recording on August 29th.
That's my fault for taking children home.
Yeah. So yeah, I was thinking that we could, like, I'll give like a real quick high level overview, and I think that when we go through these, um, I was thinking maybe we go through them like pretty quickly. Like, I think we can have a little bit of discussion for each one, but get into I think probably discuss them as a whole at the end
And
after
refer
we.
back to them if we need to.
Yeah,
Possibly.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I
So
think that if we get into like the depths of it early on, we're going to be referring to like later ones that we haven't gotten to yet.
yeah.
So I don't want to just blow through them. Like I want to give them each a couple minutes, but you know, what I don't. What do you think?
Maybe we'll just let you drive it. You mention something, and if we have something relevant to talk about, we try to make it
Yeah, sure.
like a
Okay.
debate. Keep it 1 minute or something.
Yeah.
And then when we get all done, I could then go into the idea of, okay, in the Microsoft world,
Yeah.
some of this we get for free from the operating system is the fact that we're not necessarily following all this the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because I don't think
Okay.
it is.
Should I hand it off to one of you, or do you want me to just dive right in and just
Now, I
say
would
the
just
first
say
one?
you go through the 12, and after each one, if we have a comment, we'll go comment. If not, move to the next one.
Okay.
I mean, I may ask some clarify questions. Like you talk about code base. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Kind of have a conversation without necessarily. I'll lead the witness. So, Jess, what do you mean exactly by code
Yeah.
base? What is this base you speak of? Are there Cylons at this base? Are they
How
looking
can
for
you tell?
Is they looking for the one true God? The assist admin.
Okay.
I was kind
You
of
ready
looking to see if we could find any kind of history. I mean, we know it comes from the co-founder of Heroku.
Yeah.
Is the person who signed his name to it.
So I guess that's one thing. I don't know much about Heroku. Should we even talk about it? Like,
Oh, I do.
how relevant is that to our audience?
Well, it's very relevant because it's what Azure started out as, which is platform as a service, and not app there. What's the other one?
App Harbor was like it too.
App Harbor,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
App Harbor was like the .NET version. Well, I mean, I shouldn't
Yes.
say was. It still exists,
Yeah.
but it was the MVC version of it. You
Yes.
Okay, well then this is
Code
the
and
conversation we should
deploys it
have
out.
right
Yeah.
afterwards. We can say,
Yeah.
So I would think the analogs today on the big boys are Beanstalk in AWS and Azure Web Apps in Azure.
Yeah. Okay.
Or, you know,
again,
Google
just
Apps.
I think it's important to talk about it and then
Right.
tie it up quickly about the context of the audience, the Microsoft audience,
Right.
Yeah.
without like getting into like what does it mean.
Yeah. Okay. So then I'll stumble through the intro, and
Let's hope not.
I'll just say the first one. Okay.
And,
Are we ready?
I expect you to go through all 12, and we'll comment as we go.
Yeah. Sure. I'll drive it.
I just think it'd be easier
Sure.
than trying to split it up.
Yep. Okay. Well, oh, you mean me just blow through all of them like?
No, you mention one, we talk about it real quick,
Okay.
and then
Yeah.
you drive to the next one.
Sure.
The other way we could do is you do 4, I do 4, Chris does 4, but that seems like
no. Yeah. I'll
it
just,
won't flow as cleanly.
yeah.
What are you, crazy?
Well, then we'll debate. Well, which one do you want, Chris? Which
Yeah.
one do I want?
We're no professionals here.
But I mean, are you going to do like? I mean, obviously we could blow it and spend 30 minutes on the introduction, but a short like, where did this come from?
That's what I was going to stumble through.
Okay. I mean, look, I don't know much more about it than you do. That
Do you want to do that? By stumble, I mean
You're
we-
I
reading.
didn't script it. Yeah.
so we know who the guy is.
Yeah. Adam
Let me-
Weiner.
Let me
right?
bring up his
That's-
website. Okay. So we have Adam Wiggins,
Yeah, Wiggins.
who wrote this, and if you go to about.adamwiggins.com, you'll see it's still highlighted there.
Yeah.
I mean, the big
And-
takeaway I get. Sorry, get Chris.
I was going to say he co-founded Heroku, and he speaks about topics such as application
No,
development.
I read many of his blog posts, and he talks. So like you can see, it's very interesting if you go on his blog. You can see like the lead up to this document where he like talks about each of these things in public on his blog, and it's basically his history, his personal history, and then his history at the problems that like the way that he designed Heroku.
Right.
And then he in one of his blog posts, it's pretty funny. He actually challenges you to like. Go ahead. Go if you have a Heroku app that you installed 5 years ago. Go ahead and load it up. It'll still run. It'll run exactly like it did.
Mm-hmm. My key takeaway is the bottom part, the Martin Fowler stuff. If you read this,
I know. I was going to.
You read this book. It's like, this is all what this book is about.
Yeah.
Well, along with 100 other things. So,
okay.
That's my key takeaway.
All right.
Ready to record?
Hold on.
It's always weird when you're looking up.
Yeah, that's my.
Now I know why you look up. I was always like, why do you keep looking up? Now I know why you got the bigger monitor.
Bigger screen. Yeah, my second screen.
I thought you were just napping sometimes. I thought you were just like,
that's when I go like this.
Yes. And I never know what that means. Like you're annoyed or you're just like actually resting.
No, I'm a very audible learner, an audio learner. So I will when I'm trying to concentrate when somebody's talking, I will often close my eyes so I can like get rid of visual stimulation. All right. All right.
Let's do it. Where were you doing that? Chris, have you seen anything about the whole coding for kids things? Some of the Microsoft guys have been floating that around.
Which one? Which thing? I mean,
I don't remember. I'd have to look it up. There have been a few. It's like a do-it-yourself device thing. It's like a little. I'm probably not gonna be able to find it right now. See if I can dig it up. Some Microsoft. I have a bunch of Microsoft people on my freaking Facebook, and they're riffing shit all the time. Oh, that's interesting.
It's 11:58.
Well, we got 5 minutes. We have to dedicate this episode to Willy Wonka too, by the way.
What? Why?
He died.
Oh, really?
Yep.
What, today?
Sunday.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, let's get started.
No, I'm trying to find the thing for Chris.
What?
The coding for kids thing.
Oh.
It's like a 190-hour thing or something.
And nobody likes kids.
Nah, kids are over it. That Willy Wonka died, so all our childhoods are forever shattered. No more golden tickets for us. You know what? I hate it, Facebook, because when you can't find the person you're looking for, but usually they make like 100 comments a day. Now I can't find them at all.
Are we ready?
I think so.
Ready when you are.
I'll find it later and send it. All right, record time.
Yep.
20-second countdown.
Yes. 3, 2, 1, go. Hello, and welcome to the Static Void Podcast. I'm Jess Chadwick.
I'm Todd Snyder.
And I'm Chris Gomez.
And we are your hosts. We're recording this on the evening of August 29th, 2016, and in this episode, we're going to take a little break from our ongoing .NET Core series, and we'll get a little more high level and talk about modern application architecture, specifically the concept of the 12-factor app. So the 12-factor app is a methodology and a set of principles that help developers build maintainable and scalable applications that avoid, quote, software erosion. So we'll get into what that is a little bit later. A little bit of background on the 12-factor app. It was written by Adam Wiggins, which was he was one of the founders of Heroku, the infamous or famous application platform for Ruby developers. And it describes the principles that he and the other folks at Heroku use to ensure a solid platform to host applications. And it was really heavily inspired by Martin Fowler's patterns of enterprise application architecture. So I know, Todd, that
Yes.
you're a huge fan of Martin
Required
Fowler.
reading.
Yeah.
Should never be allowed to type on your computer if you haven't read that book.
Yeah.
Take the keyboard away.
As the name says, it's 12 factors, right? So these principles, there's 12 kind of high-level principles, and we're going to start by really just kind of going through them, just kind of the textbook definition of what it says on the site. So the site that we're looking at, that this is readily available at, is 12, the number 12, 12factor.net. And so you can go and you can read them all there, and it's actually available from there as a downloadable EPUB. So you can download it in book format too. Nice quick read. But we're just going to go through them real quick and then just kind of talk about what it means to us as .NET developers, right, on the Microsoft stack and in the Microsoft world. And then also kind of Todd and Chris and I will just kind of talk about some of the experiences that we've had with these kind of concepts in our careers. So we'll just go ahead and kick it off. So the first one, code base. One code base, tracked in revision control, many deploys. So, Todd, what does that mean to you?
Oh, that sounds like a mythical thing. One code base, throw them all. So, what I take away from reading this is it sounds like source control, but I think it's a lot more than just that. I think particularly when they talked about this idea, you have a single set of code with multiple different deployments. I think part of the idea is, at least from if you look at the whole big thing, is like your configuration shouldn't be in your source control. That's more of a thing about different deployed environments. It's still the same code. That's my big takeaway. So you think about stuff like Git and things, it feels like that fits a little more into this kind of methodology than something like TFS, which tends to have, while you can do all the same things in it, it feels like with TFS you just end up creating all these crazy branches and things, and there's not really one code base.
Yeah.
There's at least in my experience of what I've worked in environments, we end up with different revisions and versions, and there's not really a single code base, where this seems more like there is one code base, and then you have these branches and things that are specific to different environments or releases and things.
Yeah,
So,
I think that as .NET developers, there'd be some characteristics of an app that met this requirement. One is that you aren't sharing an external library's code in your code base. In Subversion, there's the externals. And so what you could do is you could say, well, common code will be in this portion of the Subversion tree, and then in all of our projects we'll declare externals that brings it in. Well, that wouldn't fit here because you're actually bringing in code instead of dependencies. So I think for us .NET folks, we would see everything brought in as dependencies. We'd probably see something that's pretty F5able. That we're going to see other characteristics of an F5able app, I think, in later pieces.
Yeah.
But I feel like those are the kinds of things that would say, like, hey, you're meeting this one code base, many different deployment environments rule.
Yeah. I think to me it means that you're really a lot of applications have really kind of multiple applications in them, right? So you've got this like giant monolith that for traditional reasons, basically ease of deployment, that you really only wanted to set up one environment. And once you had that one environment kind of set up with duct tape and everything is just perfectly set up, you just kind of overload that one environment with all of the code in your organization, right? Whereas, like a great example of this would be the website, the public-facing website, let's say an e-commerce store, right? There's the store that's actually customer-facing on the web, and then the the admin site behind it, the place where you actually go and modify the products that are available, the prices and all of that stuff. Those would be considered two different apps, right? And two different code bases. And I think where a lot of folks, including myself, certainly in the past, but even still now sometimes, will combine both of those things together, and now that admin app will be like an area in my ASP.NET MVC app, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'll be part of that code base, and it just encourages that code base to grow and grow and
more
grow.
monolithic as opposed to. I mean, part of this, the whole idea of 12 factors and what they were trying to accomplish was the whole idea of software as a service, right? Which implies small workable things doing a small set of operations. Yeah,
and even right, going down to that granularity too, like maybe taking chunks of that application and breaking them out into smaller modules that they themselves are their own code base, right? So like you have this like shared module or whatever that is this common core, maybe the domain model or something like that, right? Where you have that common core and you're actually sharing it across multiple code bases.
I mean, as we go down to these other factors, it talks a little bit about that, and it actually talks about true isolation of those things, which I think is where our experiences probably differ. We all agree the idea that you definitely have different projects and a solution and things. I think part of the challenge to us in the Microsoft world, we kind of tie solution as the whole thing, and not necessarily, and it usually drives to build processes and things. It's not necessarily, it promotes the more monolithic approach of things.
Well, that's how Visual Studio is set up, right? You have a solution and you have multiple projects. That's a good thing, right?
Yes, it's a convenient thing. But I think it doesn't necessarily fall into the whole 12-factor methodology, which isn't a bad thing. We'll talk more later. Yeah, so the next one is, I think this kind of rolls right into it. The next one is dependencies. So you should explicitly declare and isolate dependencies. So I think that's kind of ties into what we were just talking about when you're breaking things into modules, whether they're your things or third-party dependencies or even other system resources, databases or whatever. Everything should be explicitly declared and brought in so you don't have these hidden dependencies. At least that's how I take it. So the classic example for me that .NET folks will pretty much all get these days is NuGet. Yep,
right?
NuGet was where I was agreeing with.
So as opposed to having like the .NET framework installed on your system, and you can't really tell by looking externally at the application what libraries you're using, other than perhaps, I guess, the references in Visual Studio. But there was no file, there's no declarative thing that says, these are the things that my application depends on. And if you have a connection string that is literally just a string to a database, there's nothing outside of your application that dictates that either. So I think this is kind of a principle that says, declare all that stuff, make all of your dependencies very explicit, which I love. I mean, this really drives a lot of my architecture, no matter what it is dependencies. For me, dependencies are the nightmare of software development.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea of dependency injection, version control. I mean, when I read these things, that's what I think of: a version control, the idea of taking advantage of a dependency injection framework. You talk about NuGet being more of the deployment mechanism, how you get things. But even Node now, right? Thinking about you're going to use Node for certain things, you may have very similar thing. The idea of packaging things up, as opposed to before when you used to basically have to have all these DLLs and all this other code around. So
right. So I feel like what this for a Node developer, your package JSON is going to have all the dependencies you need. Yeah. In fact, the npm install and go is a common metaphor there, even on the deployment.
Yeah.
So you as the developer might npm install and then start working, but even when you go off to the cloud, it might already say, listen, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to npm install, and then I'm going to npm run whatever the app that's declared in package JSON, and that's it. That's all the instructions I need.
Yep.
It's almost like an implicit contract. And for us .NET developers, we have NuGet, and we've been talking about .NET Core. .NET Core is being more explicit with those now. Instead of being hidden in packages config, it's going to be, well, what we saw in Project JSON was more explicit. We'll see where we land.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about that transition too.
No, but regardless, you're not going to have even the .NET libraries, the core-based libraries. They're not going to be installed. You're going to have to grab them as dependencies. Even
and I think
the runtime is a dependency. The .NET runtime.
Yes. Like I think we'll probably come back to this, but if you think about ASP.NET as it existed prior that doesn't fit here because a version of the .NET framework is a dependency, and it's
Yes.
nowhere explicitly declared.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point here. Is that and exactly to your point earlier, Chris, is that when you deploy to something, assume that it is a bare bones system. Assume
Right.
that it's got Windows or Linux, right? Some version of Windows or Linux, right?
Or Docker.
From there, or Docker, but even Docker, you're running on a specific
Yeah, there's some
base,
dependency.
right? Yeah. And so even in Docker, that's a great example too. In Docker, you're saying this is my base image, and that base image can have its base image, and you can follow down that dependency chain. But basically, assume you're starting with bare metal and maybe just an OS, and then you got to bring in explicitly everything else that you need on there, right?
Right.
So to your
Like
point, Chris, with classic ASP.NET, it's already there. If you have the .NET framework installed, you have a specific version, and it's already on the machine, but you need it there, right?
Yeah, like it would be considered a mistake to build your app so that it assumes that the system has something you can shell out to, even for a Windows developer. The example they give here is if you assume that you could just shell out to curl as a Linux developer in order to make some kind of web call.
Yeah,
but you
just
can't
assume
make that
it's
assumption.
installed. Yep.
So it's interesting. We're heading that way with .NET Core, no question.
Yep.
So
Yeah, definitely. It's been inspired by a lot of these Linux-based solutions.
Yeah, and nothing that I've seen in .NET Core is more obvious than the next one, which is config, right? So config, storing config in the environment. This is one of the significant departures in .NET Core from the previous versions, where you would use like configuration manager, which would basically just read from the web config, and that's pretty much it. Like they may as well call it configuration manager web config.
yeah.
Or app config, yeah.
Or you have
app
the
config.
multiple web configs, web config debug .release.
Yeah,
And then
so
you
the
source
next
control
one,
those.
Yeah, exactly. So the next one is config. Store config in the environment.
Yep.
Right. So, and this includes resource handles. I'm reading off the website. Yeah. This includes resource handles to the database, Memcache and other backing services, credentials to external services, such as Amazon S3 or Twitter, per deploy values such as the canonical host name for the deploy. So those environment-specific stuff. And so this is don't hard code these things into your code. Keep this stuff in configuration and just kind of change that configuration as you move along different environments. And so this is something that .NET Core really got right by having this configuration library, that it's not out of the box anymore. It's a library that you bring in, but not only that, it's extensible. It's inherently extensible. So right out of the box, it gives you access to literally environment variables, right? OS system environment variables, and then it's easy to get a package for JSON, or you can even get what's it called, the registry style, like basically YAML, right? So like a very kind of key value based registry style that you can define your configuration in.
Well, you know what? In bold print, when you go down that page, the 12-factor app stores config in environment variables.
Yeah, you know what?
And I think what you get there is you're OS agnostic. You don't have to worry about, there's no registry outside of Windows, and then when you're in Linux, you have folders that Windows users don't even know what to do with. And another thing you get, which I think when we kind of look at this as a whole, is your platform as a service environments give you a space to set environment variables.
Yeah.
And we can come back to that, but I feel like I think that's a big deal there. I think they're really trying to say use environment variables as this platform agnostic way to set things like connection strings and resource strings for how do you get to an endpoint. I've tried this myself with some Node projects, and it's pretty neat because even as the local developer, you can set a few environment variables to some test services, and you don't have to check that in anywhere.
Yeah.
You don't make the mistake of checking it in anywhere.
Yeah, That's huge, right? You don't want to check in the production secrets into source control for all the developers.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that's horrible, and I'm sure plenty of organizations are still.
I'm sure
doing
one or two of us have done something.
Oh yeah, no, but I'm sure plenty of people are doing that today.
Oh yeah, without question.
Right.
Or they try to jam stuff in the registry. It really shouldn't be in the registry to try to make it more secure. And it's like, if I can get to the website and read the web config file, I probably can get to the registry. So
yeah.
I have some comments on this, but I wanted to wait to the end when we kind of do the more logistical view of them.
Yeah, well, I think in regards to .NET Core, what .NET Core offers is basically kind of a prioritized approach, right? You register a bunch of configuration sources and say, try to get it from this one, and then try and get it from this one, and try and get it from this one. If it doesn't exist anywhere, then try and get it from this one, right? So, like the first one wins. So if you register the environment variables to always win, then sure, but then you have these other kind of alternatives. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we can probably get into this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a .NET point of view, I don't see us necessarily abandoning the configuration to environment variables, but I definitely think we kind of abuse configure a little bit today.
Yes, environment variables they're definitely not part of our culture. We would much rather, as a culture, we would much rather prefer the registry, right? Creating a registry setting,
which you can argue is sort of like environment variables in a way.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's more custom, hierarchical. I mean, there's a lot more to it. So, like I said, when we talk about this as like from a .NET perspective, I think I have some more specific comments.
Yeah, but it's not agnostic. You know, if you choose the registry.
No, you need to have the registry. You have the dependency on certain keys.
Yeah, it's a hard dependency. Yep.
You have dependency assuming it's there. It's not like an environment variable. Generally, at least it's been a long time since I've worked with them. If it's not there, you sort of have a fallback, and it works, right? The registry. If I try to access something and I'm not code for a fallback, my code's gonna blow up. I'm like, I couldn't find that. If I don't have access security to it, I'm not gonna find that. So it's.
I really think that this is saying environment variables. I don't think there's wiggle room here, and I know that makes us a little uncomfortable, but I think there's something to it. And when I look at deploying to even something like Azure Web Apps, you go to your Azure Web App, and there's a space for you to enter environment variables, as many as you want.
Well, I mean, you got to think about
it. All of your key values that you used to put in an app config. Get them out of there.
From a cloud point of view, this makes more sense, right? Because the idea is you may all of a sudden spin up 3 or 4 more servers.
Yep.
It needs to be able to start from that bare metal nothing to get your app going. It's expecting you that your app is resilient enough, not needing all these dependencies and things.
Yes, but the way that I typically use kind of the prioritized approach of the multiple sets of configuration sources, because even before .NET Core, I had created my own configuration manager class to basically do the same thing. And what I would do is I would have files that had the same defaults. And they weren't even necessarily environment specific, right? In fact, they were generally not environment specific. They were just the defaults. So I wouldn't have the defaults in code. I would have the defaults in the configuration, and then I could also override them in the environment variables. But I don't know. I mean, maybe having them in code would have been better. I'm not defending it. I'm just kind of giving an alternative. I think you're absolutely right, Chris. I think it is very unequivocally saying environment variables, not files. Files are bad.
I think the story that makes it work is if you think about AWS's Beanstalk or Google App Engine or even Heroku or App Harbor or Azure Web Apps, in all of those cases, how are you going to inject an extra file in?
It's just part of your deployment package, though. It's with it's just a content file the same as any other content file.
But if I do Azure Web Apps and I'm saying it's hooked up to some source control, how do I inject in? Well, here's your config file.
No, that's where you have it in.
That's where the environment variables comes in, where it's like, okay,
on
up in Azure land, I'm going to set environment variables for prod, but here on my local developer box, they'll be for dev land.
Yes, so it's in the name, right? Environment variables. When you have variables that are specific to an environment, then it's a no-brainer. But the ones that I'm talking about are more like kind of along the lines of things like feature flags, like turn this thing on or off, turn logging for the whole system or for this like subsystem, turn it on for everybody or turn it off, right? And those are the kinds of things where I can go and have a default configuration that says false. I mean, as I'm saying this, maybe you should just do this.
Well, let's go to the next one and watch. See what the next one I think can answer some of that question too.
Sure, right. Okay, so the next one is backing services. Treat backing services as attached resources. So we just mentioned backing resources in regards to the configuration of how to get to them, but now this one goes kind of the step further and and treats them as attached resources. So what does that even mean?
Well, for one thing, it means that everything from your database systems, maybe your app does some email, some outbound email, maybe it writes to queues, maybe it logs. Your app treats those as services. It's not hard coded. You don't have an expectation that this particular server or service is going to be here. You treat everything as though it's a separate attached resource. And so one way that we just talked about it was with logging. If logging now is a service, just simply maybe not supplying the environment variable for it means it's off.
Yeah, I take it from this stuff, and I'm going to throw back to the old days, DCOM. The idea that when I'm going to call something, I don't have the assumption it's going to be on the same running machine. It may be
Yes.
somewhere else.
I think
And the
that's the
configuration
core.
to
Yeah.
that is pluggable, right? We're talking about the environment variables and things. It's part of the environment knows, all right, on this environment, the service is located at XYZ port on this
Yeah.
machine.
Right.
Where today, a lot of times what we're doing, we're putting in webconfig, or even if you use WCF, you used to generate those proxies, and all of a sudden now that you had a hard-coded connection information inside of your code.
Yeah.
So it kind of broke the rules. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think these are definitely some areas where in the Microsoft world, because of the convenience sometimes, we can easily fall into some of these traps of not thinking through it. But what I take from this is the idea that everything is a service and it's all pluggable.
Right.
I'm going to call the logging service. If it's not there, my code doesn't break. It just doesn't get logged.
Yeah.
Or it could
And
be
how they can
local.
say- Yeah.
Like
Maybe
you
local
could put all the services on your local laptop and get the URLs correct, and you're great. Everything works.
Yeah.
But it also, I think it applies to the whole dependency concept of everything is loosely coupled. I don't know what's local. I don't have like
Sure.
a reference. A
You don't
project
even care.
reference to this. I just have some way of communicating to the logger, and if it's there, it works. If it's not there, because the system still behaves the way expected, it just doesn't log. Where today we have to explicitly say, and a reference the log for net, and requires a bunch of stuff to go in the web config, and then I have to call out to that stuff, and I'm using very explicit dependencies. Where this, it feels like the idea is very loosely contract-based dependencies.
Yeah, I think this is very related to the concept of microservices, right? Like each of your resources is a microservice, and it can interact with the other ones. So even your Amazon S3 and the Twitter API that you depend on, and your MySQL, they're all kind of services that you connect to and you consume. And you yourself are a service, and any one of you can be up or down or any status or to you guys both made the same point on any machine. Definitely not necessarily local, right? But any machine, and it shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
It also on the page in bold, the code for 12-factor app makes no distinction between local and third-party services. Which I think this kind of ties back to what we talked about in the first point, which is one code base per application, right? And so when you start splitting up kind of your monolithic thing into multiple code bases, multiple applications and multiple code bases, each of those things, regardless of the fact that you wrote them, is just the same. It's a resource just the same as the Twitter API is a resource, regardless of the fact that you own it.
It's funny when I read through this stuff, I'm like, so is this SOA again? This is really what SOA was all about. Having discovery and a way you called discovery services, and it knew how to go get things for you, and you didn't necessarily have these kind of dependencies. It feels like it's trying to achieve or promote the same principles. Obviously not using SOAP and all the other stuff related to it, but it felt very much like the same.
It's loose coupling, certainly. Yep. Yeah. All right, so the next one, build, release, run. So I think we're getting away from that kind of design time architecture, getting more into like how we're actually running this stuff and getting it out in the wild. So build, release, run, strictly separate build and run stages. So a code base is transformed into a non-development deploy through 3 stages. The build stage, which is a transform which converts the code repo into an executable. There's a lot more stuff in there I'm not going to read. The release stage, which takes the build that was produced by the build stage and combines it with the deploy's current config, and then the run stage, which actually runs the app in the execution environment.
Right.
So what I take from this is, if you think about, and I'm more familiar with Azure, but I'm sure the other ones do this too, when you go to set up your Azure app, you can tell it these are sort of the steps to deploy something. I take it this is what they're talking about here. They're not talking about your traditional, I check my code in a build server, build stuff, and I have stuff. It just seems more about, I have my code, all of a sudden I want to fire up 3 more cloud servers, and it has the mechanism to go and make all this work in real time.
Yeah.
It's not I'm not deploying the deployed thing. It's starting right from the raw.
I've been talking about this a lot in the past couple of months because I've been trying to drive kind of a more continuous integration, continuous deployment approach, combined with a more mature kind of platform as a service approach where I don't care. You run my application for me, right? Like I don't care where you run it, how many machines you run it on, not even necessarily what version of Windows, what minor version of Windows you're on. You deal with all that stuff. You patch it and everything. You keep it running. What I care is I commit my code to source control.
Yeah.
And I have configuration settings somewhere, right? From there on, you take it from there. I don't even know what happens.
Yeah. It's not a big celebration step. Okay, let's deploy everything. Get all the code check in, go build the build process.
Exactly.
I mean, in the Microsoft world, I think we do the first part. We do the build process is generally automated now. But that whole continuous integration, like to servers and things, a lot of people don't go that, that extra mile.
Not. Or they tinker with the servers.
Yeah. Then they're going through and manually changing things.
Sure.
We talked about it, I think, last time. We're always RTMM into something.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think a lot of people want to admit to it, but I think there's a lot of places where they're willing to crack open the production server and say, well, try shifting this DLL around, or try the idea that this release is an artifact.
Yep.
It has a unique release ID based on when it was built and combined with configuration, and that's it. If you need to change it, it's a new release.
Yeah, I find it interesting that, so later on it says every release should always have a unique release ID. I find that interesting that wasn't stated like really clearly up front, right? Like that is part and parcel of that release that you have. That is a thing that is immutable, can never be changed, and you take it, and if you want to change it, exactly what you just said, Chris, if you want to change it, make another one. It's cheap.
Yeah, right.
And I've run into a lot of people who really just fundamentally cannot swallow that idea.
Yeah.
They're like, but 99% of the thing is fine. I just want to make this one code change. Why can't I just change this one file? It's wasteful to deploy the entire application, right? And I feel them a little bit. Like I understand where they're coming from, but like it's not. You're wrong. It's just bits. It's just even if it's 30 megs, just do it.
I think it's the attitude that treats servers like they're your pets and you love them, and to repave it is to euthanize your pet.
Yeah.
But look, when you think about what Docker is saying throw it away.
Yeah.
And throw it away, start over. And another thing that this sort of implicitly points to, you have to read between the lines, is blue-green deployment strategies, where you say, okay, we pushed, we put it in prod, we went green, not working, roll back to blue. Yeah. And you have blue ready to go.
Yeah. Not
necessarily means you have hot machines, that kind of blue-green deployment, but you could. That's one way you could accomplish it. But even if you don't, you still have the previous release ready. You can wipe, get back on the machine. Okay, you're back where you were, and then you don't fix green. you go prepare a new release.
Yeah. It's a new cycle. Yeah. I think too, like a lot of this stuff is, at least in my experience, what you just talked about, Chris, is a very manual thing. Right, I made a backup copy of the files.
Yes.
There was a problem, so I rolled back. Thinking through this stuff and other things that a lot of people have talked about recently, of the whole idea of automating or continuous delivery, that's like we say, hit a button, and now it'll roll back for us.
Yes.
It's not a manual step. We're not copying files and trying to remember things. The system knows how to do that, and it's just simply us telling it, do this, or roll back to that previous, like in this case, we're talking about time step and stuff.
Yeah. I've become more and more vocal about this lately, and by lately I mean like over the past year or two, as I really got into the concepts of continuous deployment, continuous delivery, things like that. And by concepts, I mean we're not actually doing it, but reading a lot about it and really subscribing to those ideas. We now have, and I'm often involved in kind of release planning sessions because we have kind of big bang releases, right? And we say we all get together and we everybody wants to come up with a plan and just know what's going to happen. And inevitably, the end of that is, what is our rollback plan?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always just screaming. I mean, sometimes literally, we don't have one. Our rollback plan: fix the problem, roll forward, right? Fix it, deploy again. You know, we're already invested in all of this stuff. Find the problem, fix it, go back, because inevitably, and I've done this enough, the rollback is often far more disastrous than just fixing the one issue and going forward, right?
Especially if you have database changes, there's a lot of... I think there's part of the problem with deployment, and I've seen this a lot of places, a lot of customers, is the human factor. There's so much human interaction required.
Yep.
And you may everybody may have their own scripts to do things, like the database guy will have his scripts, but when something happens, he has to do his part, and then you have to do your part, and they have to be coordinated. And it's like this big like you said, a big celebration, or a big, like, you need 10 people in the room to deploy software when all you're doing is deploying a quick feature. A new screen being deployed. It shouldn't be that much manual labor intensive.
Yeah, and I completely agree, but even if it is completely automated, we all spend our time looking to the future, right? And we're all optimistic, saying this is how it's going to work, and we're going to test that rollout plan.
Yeah.
We may give the rollback plan a quick run through and see what happens, but by definition, the rollback plan starts from an unknown state. You don't know what is broken in order to roll back, right?
Yeah. So when I take from this stuff, this looks like it's much more being explicit when saying there is an environment. It has a version of the software. It's in that state. You've changed something. It's kind of like source control, right? I can roll back, and now it's back to the state again. At the whole event processing concept. Remember, a lot of this comes in Martin Fowler book, which he's very big on domain-driven design, and the principles. It all kind of ties back to that same.
Yeah, and then a lot of systems that is literally tied back to. So, like, I use Azure Web Apps a lot. That is literally tied back to the check-in. You know, this check-in, this current release, this current deployment that is active is directly tied into this check-in and source control. And if you go to Azure Web Apps, you literally have like a list of, they're not like, here are the deployments. Here's the list of check-ins that we've deployed in the past. You know, do you want to roll back to that one? Go ahead and click it and say, roll back, revert back to that one. And it's not a rollback, it's a reinstallation of that one.
I think as we kind of go through the rest of these things, I think it's important to understand not one of these things is the solution. All 12 of these together, they build upon each other. They kind of say, if you're following these 12 steps, great. For a lot of people, I think they follow step 4, part of 5, part of 6, and so they're not taking full advantage of what they could be doing.
Yeah. All right, so let's move along, because we're going to have a lot of conversation at the end. This is the conversation as we go along. So the next one, number 6, if I'm getting my Roman numerals correct.
Yes, you're correct.
Execute the app as one or more stateless processes, and this says in the simplest case, the code is a standalone script. 12-factor processes are stateless and share nothing.
So it's probably easier for me when I looked at this to think about what violates this, because after I read that, I said, okay, what does it mean? So the example that's given, and it makes sense. If you're using sticky sessions, you violate this. If you're basically saying a consumer comes to me, and now I have to remember that you need to keep coming back to this process because I have something sticky about your session, then it's not stateless anymore.
Yeah, well, you're maintaining some state.
Yeah. And I think the best practice has been to get away from those kinds of issues for quite some time. It makes you wonder, though, how many apps out there still, maybe either by using a hardware router or the web server itself, are still ensuring that once a session has begun, you're coming back. The use of the session object itself gets you into some trouble here, because it means that you got to manage that over the multiple threads if you're a .NET developer in your ASP.NET application. That's one way to violate it.
I like to think of this as, in a more positive light, I like to think of this as well, I guess it's not positive. Your thread, your application can die at any time, right?
Sure.
Is that make sure that when you are consuming, when you have states, we're talking about
Yeah.
sessions, store that state somewhere else because not just your process, but your machine, your
Yeah.
entire environment that you're running in can just completely die at any time. And not only should that not be disastrous, it should be expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, think of ASP.NET, right? The worker process, right? The session is tied to the worker process. Any point in time, IIS could decide, hey, I need to create a new worker process, right? And that will worker process go away. A lot of devs don't think in that term, though. They don't. To me, when I read this thing, I'm thinking of that, the whole idea of the worker process. Is this going to exist for a period of time, and I should expect it to go away? I shouldn't be assuming I gotta fire up session and jam in a big data set that has all the information I'm ever going to need, and the user will never not need that or never have it. You should think more in the next time I come here, I may be back to nothing. Can my app handle that?
Yeah, the machine may not exist anymore because you might have a little farm of 4 or 5 of these that are listening for requests.
And then thinking in cloud terms, right? The idea that all of a sudden there's 10 more cloud servers handling stuff, then they go away. It's the idea of processes. So I think the process term here is not necessarily the running process as we think. It's more about that environment, that or execution process. So it's going to exist for a period of time, and then it's going to be gone. Right. Don't assume it's there again. So the whole session thing is a good analogy for the Microsoft world.
Yeah. Okay, so moving right along. Number 7, port binding. Export services via port binding. Now this one seemed oddly specific to me.
Well, one thing it's saying is that our legacy way of deploying web apps might be to have a hard reliance on a web server of a certain kind.
Yeah.
Like ASP.NET MVC requires IIS.
Yep.
You're not getting anywhere without IIS. The idea in the 12-factor app is that you could just run the process. So this is, again, .NET Core heading this direction, but we also had this with ASP.NET Web API, with SignalR, and with WCF.
Yep, definitely.
To be completely self-contained in your processes, and you can just run it, and you can visit the URL at localhost. That doesn't mean in deployment that you can't route to, a web server.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So and often what we take is, yes, of course we're going to use IIS because that has always been just the one option for ASP.NET apps and Microsoft developers. But even more than that, IIS is bound by default to port 80 and port 442, right? So why would I ever change that? I'm just going to host it. And we end up doing like VDIRs, virtual directories off of it and everything. And just, even though it's possible for us to, create new applications and bind them to different ports, we rarely ever do, just because why would we do that? HTTP is port 80.
Yeah.
Why would we do that?
The reason why we're using HTTP is because it's port 80 and it's open the firewall, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we went down that path.
Why would we change the laws of nature and change port 80? If HTTP is not port 80, then geez, what can we trust, right?
So again, when I take away from this app one is thinking more about the whole big thing ties into the idea that everything's a software as a service. You shouldn't have these dependencies. You shouldn't be expecting something to be at a certain port on a certain machine.
Yes.
It should be configurable, like we're talking about the idea too of the whole idea of the web server, right? The whole idea of ASP.NET Core is I may deploy this to a Tomcat running on Linux, or I may be deploying it to Apache on something else, or IIS. It should be able to work the same. The same code base could be able to work independent of that hosting environment.
Yeah. So .NET Core is ready for this.
Yes,
I think, in my opinion.
A lot of the decisions were inspired by this and other factors, other things.
Sure.
I mean, I just joked about how nobody ever changed the default, but this has always been possible even with IIS, right?
Oh yeah, I run stuff all the time on port 80, but it's not the default.
I think if you've been doing ASP.NET development for a long time, I don't think this was so true. Remember Cassini? Remember that development web server? That thing caused us a lot of problems, right?
Yeah.
I think once we got IIS Express, Microsoft did an excellent job of making it so that locally on your machine with no other support after you've installed Visual Studio,
Yes.
You had an environment that looked and felt just like IIS, so that you didn't have to worry so much about this particular rule. And then to top it all off, Azure Web Apps is ready to take your code as is and deploy to IIS, and so is Beanstalk, and so was App Harbor. So you had service providers that were ready to kind of let you work in IIS Express locally, deploy, and don't worry, we've got it covered for you. We'll get you out to IIS.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, it's not what this seventh factor is looking for, but you know what? It didn't matter too much for us. Just because I think the tooling was great.
Yeah, the tooling made it convenient. I think the
Yeah.
bigger takeaway is sometimes we should be, so at least from an application architecture point of view, you should be thinking through these things and say, yes,
Right.
I'm making a conscious decision to do this. Instead of saying, well, it's here and it works, it's easy.
Yes.
It's
Longer term, it's going to serve us to at least think about this one. First of all, because .NET Core is ready for it, and second, this whole thing is about deploying to clouds.
Yep.
That's what I think, and that's what all of these things are pointing to.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to number 8. So principle number 8, we've got concurrency. So here we're back to processes. Scale out via the process model. And in the 12-factor app, processes are a first-class citizen. Processes in the 12-factor app take strong cues from the Unix process model for running service daemons. Using this model, the developer can architect their app to handle diverse workloads by assigning each type of work to a process type. For example, HTTP requests may be handled by a web process and long-running background tasks handled by a worker process. So here we've got basically an orchestration of a bunch of different processes handling different logic. That's kind of how I read it.
Yeah, what you're starting to get to here, I think, is if you've followed the previous steps, you're getting to a horizontal scale out. You just bring up new systems, you put your processes on it, and because everything is self-contained, everything's isolated and stateless, and your configuration is in the environment of each machine, they all just start working.
And you don't make the assumption they're local or remote.
Right.
It just works.
Right.
So this feels like they're describing Node in many ways. I think this is one of the areas today where we could do a lot of this stuff, but really we don't have that easy way of doing this in the Microsoft world today. I always think about MTS. MTS used to have the same thing. I used to be able to go into MTS and say, here are all my processes, get them out here, and then you manage them for me. I don't really.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't think it's difficult to do this with .NET applications or ASP.NET applications today, because I think to your earlier point, Todd, all of these principles kind of end up intertwining together, right? So if you've been following the concepts such as backing services, treating things as attached resources, and keeping your processes stateless so that it doesn't matter if they die, and they are always connecting to another resource as kind of a first-class concept, making that connection regardless of the fact of whether that resource could be a process running right next to it on the same machine or physically across the world on another machine, it interacts with it in the same way. So if you're following that, then you kind of inherently roll into this, right? So now you're saying, well, this introduced the concept of types to me, to that whole thing, right? So each of my processes is stateless, and I'm interacting with them as attached resources. Now I'm saying these are my set of web processes, these are my set of worker processes, and these other kind of specific types of processes, and I can run 50 workers on a pool of 20 servers. And then I can run one physical web server and run 3 or 4 web processes on it, right? It just simply doesn't matter, or any combination therein, right? Like, it just doesn't matter. My app works exactly the same.
So I guess I kind of look at it more from a outside of the web world, thinking about it. What I feel like this too is in the Microsoft world, this is more like a BizTalk type thing or workflow type management session. I need something that would manage all these processes. Where in a web app, really, I'm just dealing with one process, the worker process, right? Yes, you're correct. If you went to the other factors and you follow them to a T, you may architect your application like that, but you have to do that. That's extra work you have to do.
Yeah.
With a traditional web application, It's create a new project, add a reference to it, and off I go. I'm not
Sure.
thinking about my data layer is going to run a different process. My search may run a different process than my thing.
Yeah, well,
It's
this is
kind of
sort of a warning to not
do
build your
that.
web project so that you can't have 2 or 4 or 10 of them.
Yeah.
Because that happens.
You might need to scale differently.
You tie a
Right.
few things together, and next thing you know, you realize you can't deploy 2 of your website. Maybe because per request they're writing to the database, and you're like, well, how would the second web server ever know where to look? You know, if you made little mistakes like that, is I think what this is also trying to say is you want to scale it's setting you up for scaling horizontally.
Yeah.
Because, and like I said, you might have different parts of your application that need to scale more, right? If you're just reading, like the contact page may not need that much scale, but all of a sudden you're doing this massive search where you have thousands of people hitting it, then you need to have a
Maybe you
different
need
level
more
of scale.
workers for the search or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I have a couple of kind of real world scenarios that I've actually run into that I definitely want to get back into this and talk about this later.
Yep.
So the next one is disposability. So disposability, maximize robustness with fast startup and graceful shutdown. 12-factor apps processes are disposable, meaning they can be started and stopped at a moment's notice. This facilitates fast, elastic scaling, rapid deployment of code or config changes, and robustness of production deploys. So they have minimum startup time, and they shut down gracefully when they receive the signal to die. And they should also be robust against sudden death. So I had kind of brought this up a couple of things before. So apparently this is the principle that kind of talks about disposability and the fact that processes can die at any point and should be designed in that way.
Yeah. If you're nervous that you cannot have the machine just simply go away, that, oh, my service needs to do some shutdown housework,
Yeah.
then you're not ready
Close
for
the
the
database
cloud.
connection, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would say, to me, the litmus test is, could you run your service on Amazon Spot instances? Those instances that you basically say, hey, I'm willing to pay 3 cents for these. So when the demand goes to the point where the instances drop to 3 cents, then fire me up. And when it goes above 3 cents, then just kill me.
Yeah.
If you can live in that scenario, then you're ready for this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, as Windows users, or really as OS users of pretty much any file system or most file systems, we're like really afraid of sudden shutdown of our operating system, because you could just completely screw up the file system in many of them. I know that there are plenty that are built specifically to handle that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I know that I'm very, very worried about my operating system, my PC just shutting off immediately.
Again, I think this really built upon all the other same factors we talked about: to be able to
Yeah.
scale up, having your dependencies be loosely coupling, the idea that things will come and go as over time. You don't like, okay, this DLL has to be in a certain place, and I have to be ready to call it.
Yeah.
If it's not
Or I
there-
would say even little things like in your design, like let's say you're pretty distributed, you're reading messages off of queues, and a worker gets a message off a queue to do some work. Are you prepared for the situation when the worker just goes away?
Yeah. Right.
Just is the application architected to handle that?
Right.
You know,
right.
what happens to the message? Does the queue system
Right.
say, well, I haven't heard back in 10 minutes, so I'll give it
Yep.
to someone else? You've got to solve those problems.
Yeah.
I think we start thinking about order of things too. Sometimes you have to handle things in a certain order. Yeah, definitely. Again, this sounds like BizTalk. At least the things you would try to do in a BizTalk type system.
Yeah. So I had brought the idea of your process going away at any point in the earlier one, but this is kind of the result. To your point, Chris, this is kind of the net result of that. What happens when that happens? Like, sure, it's fine, and your application continues to work, but in the exact point of you're a worker and you pick up a message off the queue, and then you say you're going to process it, and then you don't.
Yeah.
What happens, right?
Yep.
And to me, I think this means, design for a graceful shutdown. Like, expect at any point that you're going to be told to shut down, but also if you do just die, if your operating system just loses power immediately, then the system should be resilient enough that you don't have to tell somebody you're dying in order for things to continue on. right? You can say, hey, I'm not going to be able to finish this because I'm going to stop, right? That to me is a graceful shutdown. Like, I'm in the middle of a
Yes,
2-minute
right.
job, but hey, I'm giving you the message back
Yes.
because I can't handle it. I've been told to stop. I'm doing that, right? But then there's also the
Dropped call.
yeah, the
Yeah.
dropped call of, hey, this guy picked up a message 10 minutes ago and I never heard back from him. I should probably give that to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then I think, especially in the cloud with lots of machines and everything, and especially if you're kind of moving fast with the multiple deployments, the fast startup is key.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to sit there, waiting around. As
You
we,
don't wait
as
10 minutes around to do a 2-second operation.
we as ASP.NET developers, this is kind of one of our curses, is the
Yes.
startup time of IIS and ASP.NET applications. It's we pay for it up front.
Always tell when it's starting from scratch. Oh,
Yeah.
building the
Yeah.
assemblies.
Yeah.
What's
All right. So moving right along, number 10, Roman numeral X, dev prod parity. Keep development, staging, and production as similar as possible. So historically, there have been substantial gaps between development, and these gaps manifest in 3 areas. The time gap. So developers can work on code that takes days, weeks, or even months to go into production.
Years.
Decades.
Months.
Yeah.
That's the best case scenario, right? The personnel gap. Developers write code. Ops engineers deploy it.
Yep.
And the tools gap. Developers may be using a stack like Nginx, SQLite, and OSX, or in our world, Visual Studio, IIS, and I guess what would that be? SQL
More like
Express.
IIS Express
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
IIS, and we're
Yeah.
working on the client instead of the server.
Yep. So the 12-factor app is designed for continuous deployment by keeping the gap between development and production small.
Yep. So I think there was a couple things. One of them is having your developers use different tools and engines than production is just asking for small incongruities, small gaps. But there's another little somewhat subtle point in here, which is the development group needs to take responsibility for being at least invested in deployment. If you are full-on DevOps, then you're like, yeah, our developers are our ops, and developers are 100% invested. That's very hip right now, but also possibly not very realistic. You might have a whole operations team.
Yeah.
But you've got to find a way culturally, without hurting anyone's feelings, for the developers to be invested in the pain as well, so that they don't just throw it over a high wall and they can't hear the screams on the other side as they go off and have some pizza,
Yeah.
They definitely have to understand that every decision they make has an impact for deployment. Think deployment first. Is the methodology I use. Don't think about just your environment. Just running on your machine is not good enough.
Works on my machine.
I tell people all the time, it drives me nuts. People are like, I'm done with the feature. Okay, is it checked in? No. I'm like, it does not exist if it's not in source control. I'm going to come to your machine and take your machine away. And if you need to read it again, it doesn't exist. Till it's in source control, it just drives me nuts. You check in every day. It's okay. As long as it compiles, doesn't break other stuff.
Yeah.
Don't be keeping your code out for 3 weeks. Well, I'm not quite done yet.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. If that goes away, you don't have anything.
Yeah. Well, and that is our classic joke, right? It works on my machine because everything is great because I had the configuration just right and I had the set of source code that is only on my machine and I forgot to check that in, right?
You're running
Everything
as
works
admin.
great.
You're
Exactly.
running as admin.
So I think this directly attacks that works on my machine. I think in a number of different ways. One of the most important, is that your machine is literally the production machine. Not literally in the sense that you're remoting into the production machine, but the environment, you use the same process to build the environment that you're running in locally as you do to build the environment you're running in production. And the only difference is the environment variables, back in principle number 3. Right?
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing to think about. So in the old days, we used to be very adamant about, you know what, maybe developers should run server as their development box, as opposed to back then it was Windows XP or something.
Yeah.
The idea that if I'm going to deploy to 2012, maybe the developer should be developing it right there in 2012 and not
I've been a part of
that distinction.
Yeah.
Because, now it's better, right? For the most part, Windows 7 and 10, it's very similar code base. But there's something to say about this idea that you're using the same SQL version at minimum as to what's production. You're not using 2016 and production is 2014 or something.
Yeah.
It just common sense things.
This stuff has bitten me many, many times.
There's so many places that do it. They just do weird things, right? Or production.
Yep.
You can't change production, but check it. It's more convenient for you to install like SQL Developer as opposed to SQL Standard or something.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like this is areas we make mistakes, but we probably should really think through them more.
Yeah, this has bitten me several times in kind of the inverse, where we say, well, as a developer, when I run it locally, SQL Express is limited to, X number of
10 connections or something.
of connections,
and
or
one CPU or whatever.
Yeah, like it doesn't work on my local machine, but of course it doesn't because I'm running SQL Express. It'll work fine.
Right.
Just deploy it.
Yeah. All right.
Definitely. Something for
Now-
taking tools. Same thing too. I would say add on to that is if you're using Node or even TFS build in your build process, the developer should be using the same tool.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be using something else because he likes it better or something.
Okay, so the last 2 points are, to me, they're kind of linked. They're more toward admin, like not really necessarily kind of customer facing or user facing. The 11th principle is logs. Treat logs as event streams. So we already talked about logs. In fact, the 12-factor app referred to them earlier as an example of a backing service. But here it's actually called out as a specific principle, where logs are event streams. Treat them as event streams. So logs provide visibility into the behavior of a running app. And in server-based environments, they are commonly written to a file on a disk, but this is only an output format.
Yeah, I think this will be controversial for .NET developers. This is saying write to standard out and ball game. If you want to do more with it after that, we have many tools to help you do so.
Yeah.
This is what I think they're saying is like write to standard out.
It specifically
pick it up with Logstash if you want to.
It specifically says that each running process writes its event stream unbuffered to standard out. It literally says that.
So in the .NET world, I think a good practice is using something like Log4net or the enterprise block stuff, where you would write to a standard log thing, but then configuration or something else would handle. Well, does that mean write to the event log database or something else? You shouldn't be taking hard dependencies on where the log is. I think the word event stream, though, has a very important thing. I think that's basically saying is just keep writing to it. Just keep writing to it. Keep writing. Don't worry about where it's written to. Don't worry about if you're writing too much. Just keep writing. Let the thing that's consuming that decide what do I log, what don't I log, when do I log it, when do I purge the logs.
I've run into that problem a lot. Is that I've been in places where before I got there, their approach was they actually did kind of conditional logging. Like in the code, they would say, well, if this flag is set, or if we're in this environment or whatever, okay, then you can write the debug log, right? Because we don't want to write debug logs all day long. Like that's going to fill the disk, right? No, don't worry about it. In your code, you just say, here's the debug statement, right? Here's the debug log.
Here's what I want to log.
Right, and at one time, something else can figure out what happens to that, and that what may just be nothing. You may write it to null. Yeah. So
I think that this one is trying to externalize the concern completely, and it's thinking cloud. It's saying you're not going to have an opportunity to say where on the file system to write a log because you may not even have access to that file system if you're on Beanstalk or if you're on web apps or if you're on App Engine. So write to standard out, and then use other systems and services to subscribe to that stream. Sure. And maybe the service, maybe it's logs like a Logstash forwarder or something. It's subscribing to the stream and saying, well, I'm not interested in debug messages. I'm just going to let those fall on the floor because I'm
but this
production.
is another one that seems oddly specific to me, right? Specifically, the statement that we read earlier, write to unbuffered standard out.
Right.
Does that mean if I'm
They're putting a stake in the ground.
Yeah.
But does that mean if I'm using Log4net, I'm not adhering to this?
I would argue in practical sense, you are adhering to this. The principle of the law, the principle of the rule is I don't care what it's going to be written to. I'm just logging. It's a constant event stream to me.
I agree with you that there are ways to accomplish the same exact goal. I'm being pedantic in that, and I don't think I'm trying to be like legalistic. I think it's being very clear, saying I don't want that to be an application concern. I want that to be configuration and environment concern. In fact, it could be you're deferring the architectural decision. Operations can decide what to do with the stream.
That's a good point.
I guess.
And
we gotta
listen,
get Adam on here and see.
You don't have to love it. I'm just telling you that it's putting a stake in the ground and saying standard out's the way.
Was a way with like the enterprise block stuff or the previous application block stuff that you could write the standard out and it would pick it up. I thought there was a way to like build a hook. I mean, to me, when I think about this stuff, I think about instrumentation. And every application I've ever written, I feel like I've never really planned for instrumentation. And then it's like if this was part of the architecture, I feel like I'd have so much more information. The other key takeaway I take from this is thinking about from the cloud point of view, right? Today, if there's a production problem, we were all like, we got an exception, but what caused the exception? We don't have enough information. We at least have technically still run that same hardware in the cloud environment. That may be gone and never going to get created again. So that problem may never happen again because on that one single instance, something was set. And
right.
So to me, it's very important to have logging as everything. And I think the idea of the event stream, if it's an event stream, you keep writing to it, you're not necessarily affecting performance and scalability. Where a lot of people, they try to write this big long call stack and everything else. They're trying to do error debugging through the log more than necessarily the instrumentation piece of it. So you said the last one was related. So what's the last one there?
So the last one is hold on. So the last one is admin processes. Run admin management tasks as one-off processes. So for example, they list a couple of examples: running database migrations, running a console or a REPL shell to run arbitrary code or inspect the app's models against the live database, or perhaps running one-time scripts committed into the app's repo. So one-off admin processes should be run in an identical environment. There's that theme here. Run in an identical environment as the regular long-running processes of the app. They run against a release using the same code base and config as any process run against that release. Admin code must ship with application code to avoid synchronization issues. So I think, to me, you guys feel free to disagree, I think to me one of the kind of canonical examples of this are things like WordPress or some of the other applications as a service, the things that you would go and you would download and you would install yourself, and they have these database migrations, and these are scripts that actually come along with a version, and you say, go ahead and upgrade me to version 1.5.7, and the scripts kind of figure out, what are the differences, regardless of whether you're on 1.1 already or 1.2 or whatever. It will figure that out. It'll upgrade you, but they're all very much versioned, and they run in the same kind of environment. I don't know. You think that's a good example, or am I off base there?
So you're saying that does follow the rule?
Yeah.
You just described.
Yeah. Well, most notably the fact that they are committed. They are scripts that are committed into the repo. They're versioned against a set of code. Mm-hmm. Right, like these are the steps that you need to do in order to manipulate the previous versions of data and schema to be kind of compatible with this new version of code. So they're not just like one-offs of like the database migration script that you run once and you throw it away. They're actually checked in as kind of the history of here's what happened.
So I think talking about the database is really the area that I think most people relate to. Is like you have, right? When I go to deploy something, I run that script right one time. This sounds almost like, no, that script is like always sitting there and can be executed at any one point in time. It's part of that same source code like you were describing. So I feel like today I feel like today like that kind of stuff, like setting up the database, it's handled by a different team. It's maybe totally different from you, right? I mean, how many people check in their SQL scripts?
Yeah.
I mean, in so many places, it's like, it's just a file. Check it in. It's okay. You can have history. But to get people to use source control for SQL seems like you're fighting a losing war.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
I think one takeaway I got was in production, don't rely too heavily on tools over scripts. How many places might you actually dive into SQL Management Studio and make tweaks in the
Oh
GUI?
yeah, fire, make that data change right away.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think for exploration purposes, we're very fortunate in the Windows world to have awesome tools. And I
Yeah.
think they're great for exploration, but maybe what we should take away is when it comes time to execute an action against prod, we should turn it into a script and not use the tool so that we can take the script and we can tag it against a release. I'm not, and listen, I'm going a little off the rails from what this factor is saying, but I think instead of just going like, hey, I fixed it, well, maybe we should turn it into a script, tag it against the release, and keep a history that we did this.
Yeah. I mean, at
Yeah.
minimum, right?
I don't
I'd
think
also take
I'm exactly addressing
Yeah.
12 when I say that, but I think one thing I got out of it was, don't dive into your tools to do everything.
Yeah.
The
It sounds
visual-
like in many ways it should be part of that source code, right? This
Yeah.
is if I want to make a database change, it should be part of the I should be able to execute that in a production environment. It's not a one-off thing that's run outside of the code base. That's what I take it as.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So those are the 12 factors. And before we get into kind of the open discussion, wow, we're an hour.
Yeah, well,
I think
Yeah.
we're pretty much done.
Took a
So
while.
okay, all right. So let me start over again. Then we're not going to get in the open discussion. We'll save that for next time, I guess, right? It's a whole other show. Or we can stop this one and we can keep recording because it's only 1 o'clock. No, sorry. I'll go back. So those are the 12. Those are the 12 factors, right? So the site is literally called 12factor.net. It was released in 2012. I don't think that really has any relation. But it is. I say that to point out that it's kind of old, right? Like 2012 in the
it's
industry.
web old,
years,
right?
that's-
In
that's-
real world time, that's only 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
Web,
right.
it's what?
It's
like
just barely
30 or
even
40
Maybe
years.
it's stable and mature.
I
Yeah,
mean, what,
right.
we've had 17 different SPA frameworks done in the last week and a half. Come on.
Yes.
We
yeah.
need the 17 factors by now. Come on.
Well, okay. So to that point, and that's funny that you set me up because we didn't even talk about this. So I went out looking for like what is the modern day? You know, has there been anything more? And there's a company called Pivotal. I thought I'd heard of them. I don't know. Some
I've
people
heard
might know
of
them.
software
Yeah.
like that. I don't know if it's the same thing or not.
But they have a free ebook that is called Beyond the 12-Factor
Beyond the
Application.
12 factors.
Yeah. So they take it and they have applied the 12 factors. I think they have a consulting arm. They've applied the 12 factors across a bunch of different clients and everything. And basically they've said, like, here is our practical version of this. So they have slightly tweaked a couple of them and they've added a few more. So their list ends up being 15. So basically, I'm not going to go through all of them. They effectively, it's the 12, more or less unchanged. And they kind of reorder them in the order of what they consider to be the priority, because 12factor.net, the original 12 factors, they're not explicitly in any order. I mean, they are Roman numeral numbered, but not necessarily in any
It
order.
feels like some of them should be more ordered together.
Yeah, exactly. So they actually do kind of take that opinion and say, here's kind of the rough order of importance. And number 2 is a new thing that they introduced that they called API first.
Yeah.
So
Design your API before anything.
Yes.
This sounds
yeah.
like SOA again. Contract first development. Where's your wisdom?
Yeah. So I'm just dropping that out there because that's kind of a teaser. I think honestly I could do an entire episode on API first, but we probably should.
Yeah.
And so the later ones, they tack them on at the end. So there are 15, and so it ends up being a total of 15. And somewhere in there, maybe they took one out. I don't know. So there's 3 at the end.
It's dynamic. It's wrapping itself up as we speak.
Number 13 is concurrency. Number 14 is telemetry. So they don't replace the logs. What we just kind of went over is logs should be an output stream, but they add in telemetry, so the actual usage of your application and the instrumentation of your application. And then finally, authentication and authorization.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely was missing from these factors. I think a lot of times those are more known things, but I think it's from a practical standpoint, it definitely feels like That's something that's missing. I mean, all these things we sometimes refer to as cross-cutting services. These are things that have nothing to do with your application's functionality, right? These are
Yeah.
things that cross all boundaries, so it makes sense to have security
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
That's
the opening of this is there is no discussion of security, authentication, or authorization in the original 12 factors. Security is a vital part of any application and cloud environment. Security should never be an afterthought.
I'd also agree too that thinking about those other principles, in development you should be doing the same thing, right? If you're going to use token-based security in production, you should be using that for development. You shouldn't be using something totally different. You should be using the same type of services, the same approaches. Yeah. Again, in the Microsoft world, we kind of get some of this for free. Like we're going to use Forms, we're going to use Windows, and it kind of just works. But there's definitely, as we think more and more about cloud, we need to start thinking about how are we going to authenticate, what does authorization means, and then from the development point of view, the same behavior should be enforced.
Yeah, definitely. And so I know that we had started out, and throughout the show we've kind of referred to, we'll get into that deeper. We'll get it. I had a couple of specific examples for some of these things, but honestly, we're already running a little bit late. It's already a little bit over an hour now that we've been recording. So I guess this is just going to roll right into a part 2.
Yep.
So we can stay tuned for that. So this is a show, I would say. So you listener, what do you think about the 12 factors? Is this stuff that you've been doing, or is this are these new concepts that you're eager to try out? We want to know. Please leave us a comment on the website, staticvoidpodcast.com, or send an email to comments@staticvoidpodcast.com. And as always, if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss on the show, please feel free to let us know through those same channels. Chris, Todd, thanks for the chat.
Yep.
Awesome. Yep.
And thank you,
Great
listener,
discussion.
for spending time with us. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Static Void Podcast. Boom. All right, that was awesome. That was freaking tight.
Yeah, we did that pretty good.
That was tight.
We can stop recording locally.
Yeah, sure. You wanted me to kill it?
Yeah. Well, no, the
All right.
broadcast I don't care about, but
Oh yeah.
we need the stop for 20 at the end. I never know when we should stop recording.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's easy for me to cut out the end.
By the way, whoever edits this, I was like, when I started the 20-second countdown, I had the freaking pause button. And I'm starting every second going, why is the thing not moving? I'm like, it just does this. Oh, pause is on. So I'm like 3 seconds behind you guys. So. But I mean, you talked mostly at the beginning too, Jess, so I think it should be fine from
Yeah.
Flag time. No, I thought that was pretty good. I thought we covered things pretty well. We kind of went back and forth and didn't get too bogged down in anything.
Oh yeah, man, we're professionals. We are experts. This show just brought us to the next level.
It's interesting that beyond the 12-factor app it's both it's almost like a status report, but then also a little bit of a response and rebuttal without, I mean, it's not rebutting it, it's saying
respectful. It's
yeah.
Well, here's the evolution, right? I mean,
I think the author mostly agrees, but then says, "Hey, here's where I don't."
Yeah. Well, no, I think they're honest, right? They're like, "Hey, we've been doing this for a while. Here's what we found."
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
So yeah, that was awesome. Had you guys seen that before?
No, I haven't.
I had seen the Google link, but I did not open the PDF.
Yeah.
I was doing other research on 12-factor itself.
The Microsoft PnP stuff talks a lot about these same things. Again, if you think about the SOA books from 10, 15 years ago, they really preached a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Not necessarily source control and those other things really weren't as paramount, but the loosely coupled services, the telemetry stuff, and instrumentation. I mean, there was a whole PnP book on instrumentation.
Yeah, it's nothing new.
No. So.
I also I gotta say a sponsor too. I got Pivotal.
Okay.
Nice.
No, not really. But I'm gonna send them the show and say, hey, come on.
Yeah. Throw a few bucks.
Yeah.
I am actually surprised at the shows that I hear have sponsors. I don't know what they're.
about the sponsors that they have, or that they have
that they
sponsors?
even have sponsors. I don't know what
Yeah.
their listenership is like,
Yeah.
but there's a few shows that I've kind of listened to, and I like them, but they feel very like, I feel like, well, this is kind of small, and yet the first minute and a half is, don't, everybody, let's thank our sponsor, blah blah blah, blah 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 is great for X Y Z, and I'm like, what, really?
Well, so I have not done anything to court any sponsors. I
Right.
have read a decent amount about sponsorship and what to think about and kind of how to go about it. And if you think about just online advertising in general, it's all the same concepts, right? But one of them is basically click-throughs, right? You just go and you don't even need to ask them for their permission. Just go and like establish register for just their open kind of reciprocity thing, or their what's the word I'm looking for? Their clickback, their referral program.
Yeah.
Right, and then it's no risk to them. They're only committing to when people actually buy something and they use your code, and then you get money, right? So like, yeah, sure, say us on your podcast. Like,
Do you mean that on the website, or do you mean that we would say?
But well, whatever, right? It is, if when you read about the podcast sponsorship stuff, it is basically the same as online advertising. That is effectively what it is. It's just audio advertising, and so there's different relationships starting from the thing where you're just joining their public, like literally me as an individual.
Yeah,
or
it's like read the
as a
ad,
podcast. Yeah,
and register the code static void, and whoever signs up with us, you get a cut.
Yep.
Okay.
Just click-throughs, right? Like any individual person can register for that on Amazon, right? And if I post it on my blog and you click on that and buy something on Amazon, I get 5 cents or whatever.
Yeah, you get that.
So then on the other end of the spectrum is like the sponsored shows. Well, like Craig is, Polymorphic podcast. He's an employee, right? That's obviously the other end of the spectrum. But on that end of the spectrum is like people who are saying, we will give you X amount of money, like on a regular basis, given that you maintain your listenership, right? Your fan base.
Posting content at the same amount of time, yeah. I mean, that's where I work. We do sponsored podcasts.
Yes.
Some very well-known ones now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other one that's kind of in the middle of the road is that they're like, you say, if you can prove, which is why I've been tracking it through Blueberry, this episode got 1,000 listens and you put our ad in, we're not going to pay you anything up front for putting that ad in, but when it goes out, and you show, you got 1,000 listeners, then we'll give you $20 per 1,000 or whatever.
I mean, they all want trackback stuff, right? Ultimately, that's what they want. They want them, whoever it is, most likely want them to come to their website or something advertising their product.
Well,
that's how they track.
No, that too, but you don't even need that, right? If you get an agreement with them, meaning you engage them and then they are proactively paying you money, where the only thing that you're giving them is ears, right?
Yeah.
And you're proving that I had 1,000 downloads of this show or 10,000 downloads of this show, and presumably 10,000 people heard this ad, then it doesn't matter how many of those people actually do anything with it.
Yeah.
Nobody has to buy anything. You're getting a flat rate of, 10 cents per 20 people or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or 100 people.
Yeah. Which makes more. I mean, that's low commitment on both sides, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're
What
not.
were our download numbers for Matt's episode?
700.
That's not bad.
So we seem to be the more popular ones. Are in that 5 to 800 range.
He is.
That's good. We've got a comment.
I know. We got a regular conversation going on there. We're contributing to the community on that page. Look at that. He is our number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th most popular show at 686.
Good. So, what are we going? When and what are we? We're going to do a follow up to the show.
Yeah.
When are we going to do
hospital?
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to the Static Void Podcast. I mean, do we want to try to aim for tomorrow night sometime, maybe?
Tomorrow? That's aggressive. Yeah. Are you free tomorrow night?
I'm probably more free tomorrow than Wednesday.
Okay. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I'll try and get some sleep.
Well, wait, I'm just using an example that
I
I don't
agree
say
with
want to
you.
wait a week because I feel
Yeah,
like
I
we'll
understand.
lose some of the momentum, and we're like, what did we say? We'll have to almost listen to it again.
Yeah.
That it feels like, and I'm not sure really it's going to be a whole another hour. It's probably like hopefully 40 minutes or something. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure we'll end up being an hour, but I feel like
It always
I
is.
feel like basically we're going to say like, hey, we went over the 12 factors last time. I don't think we need to list them per se again, and then
No,
kind of
yeah,
just
no,
dive
not at
into.
all.
Now let's talk about our experiences. Let's talk about what our opinions are of this and where it fits into everything.
Totally. No, I was being dead serious. If it was 12 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock, I would have pushed for us to
Yeah, I think
just
we're
record
kind
another one. No, we're
of
definitely
pushing it.
Yeah.
I'm actually on vacation, so.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Time to use
Yes,
days.
I will be on vacation soon too.
Well, you have a new little bundle of joy.
Yeah.
Actually, I should say you're going to have 2 little girls to deal with.
Kids are easy.
Oh yeah. Then you must be doing it wrong.
My
Kids,
wife got
pets.
so pissed at me because when our first daughter was born, I told you, Todd, I was saying like my life hasn't really changed all that much.
Yeah, that's not important thing to say. That's the wrong.
She goes, "What? What are you talking about?"
Take that foot out of your mouth now.
I was like, "Well, you're breastfeeding. I'm not really having to get up or anything."
I'm sure you can relate now, though, that you can't remember a time when you didn't have kids.
No, yeah.
It feels like they've always been there.
No, but even still, I mean, I still have a decent amount of, personal time and everything. I'm not complaining about that. It's just that I have to get up earlier, which sucks.
Work
Other
4
than that,
jobs to pay for everything,
Yeah, right.
Speaking of that, how was your Linda stuff going? Maybe you want to stop the broadcast part.
Oh, no, it's going great. I would love to broadcast on the broadcast that I am going to be re-recording the .NET Core course on the first week of October, and it should be out probably like late November or something.
Yeah, you're going on a little trip for that, right?
Beginning of December. Yeah, I fly over to Carpinteria in California, and we record there. They have a nice little studio that you go and you sit in and record professional sound.
So
stuff.
you'll be right time for .NET Core like version 1.1 or something coming
No,
out.
it's literally the week after the first business day after the release of the tooling.
Yeah.
Because we're still in RC tooling.
Yeah. Which is probably a good time to do it, right?
Yeah, and I think I don't think they have confirmed it. Maybe they have officially confirmed it, but I think they're planning on releasing it at I think it's Ignite, which is the last week of September.
I think that was sort of the goal.
Yeah, so that's the last week of September. I'm going to be recording it, and I think that's like toward the end of the last week of September. I'm going to be recording it the first week of October. So I literally have like the weekend to see how the tooling changes. And
you're going to be busy, though, a couple days before then, aren't you? Aren't you doing something else in that last week of September?
Yeah, I got Tech Bash all that week. I'm going there Tuesday night and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So, yeah, and this is all when I have a 2-week-old at home. So,
And what, a 5 and 3-year-old?
6 and a half and 3.5.
I was off by a year there.
That's all right.
Sorry, I don't keep track of your kids' ages. I know they're 3.
I can barely keep track of my kids' ages. I often tease her and I'm like, oh yeah, that's your 6-year-old point of view or whatever. And before I say it, I always have to stop and think how old are you? You're 6, right? Because you were 5 last year, and so it really throws me off that you keep aging.
6'2" is when they start that's when all the opinions come out. So that would matter. The 5-year-old may not care as much, but the 6-year-old's like, no, I am 6, and this is. Yeah. I do have a view of the world now.
Ooh, does she?
Well, the 3-year-old is probably like, I just want a new toy to play with. I'm going to be happy.
She does. The 3-year-old goes and plays with the dolls for 3 hours at a time, all alone.
So, speaking of dolls, there was something you pasted on Facebook that was kind of a scary picture of a doll hanging himself or herself. And there was no context other than, should I be afraid?
The girls would come out and we just hear, well, no, you tie it around you, and then you go over, and I'll lower you down. And Leah's like, what? What are you talking about? And she turns the corner, and they have these jump ropes, and they're like tying it around their waist on the second story of the
Oh,
house.
they were
And
propelling,
they're
huh?
like gonna go, yeah. And the 6-year-old's like, oh, I'll hold you. Like, I'll lower you down. And the 3-year-old's like, yeah, awesome, let's do it. And Leah's like, no,
No.
that's never cool at all. Like, this is horrible. Stop what you're doing. Don't ever do this again. And so they're like,
This is the hospital for you. These
yeah,
great
they're
things.
like, okay, mommy, cool. And so she walks away, and 5 minutes later, we hear this like boom, and it was they had strapped a doll onto it. They threw the doll over the landing, over the railing, and they were dangling the doll down. But so that they were playing and they loved it. It took them forever.
Yes.
But then they didn't just like drop the doll down when they were done. They literally tied it to the railing so the doll was just hanging there.
Yes. So
So
they're
I
prepared
walked
to have a little
into work.
sister, right? They're ready to go here.
They wish that they had a lighter version of them. So I walk into the hallway and there's this doll dangling right in front of my face, and I'm like, is this a threat? What's going on here? Like, these
At least it
girls are
wasn't a
turning
Chucky
on me.
doll.
It might as well.
When I was a kid, I had one stupid doll you tied to shoes. And
Yeah,
thinking back now, it looks so much like Chucky.
exactly.
Like my
like
parents were
Buffy.
not thinking.
Yeah.
The crazy freaking Joey doll or something was.
Why did you paste that link, Chris?
Oh, that's.
Paste the-
I made a Bitly link for the Jeff Fritz one.
Cool.
Why?
To read post.
Oh, well, I'm scheduling tweets on the Static Boy podcast.
Oh, nice. You have access to that, right?
Yeah.
The account? Yeah. Okay, good. You should own that because I'm horrible at social media in general.
Well, I'm not very good at it either.
Well, this Facebook post that Todd's referring to is literally my first Facebook post in a year. So.
That is probably actually the biggest thing. I'm like,
I
she posted something.
know.
And
Well,
I'm let's see, the casual, like, if I'm bored, I might sit in my phone and go, like, what's going on Facebook? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not going to respond to any of that crazy political stuff. Oh, wait a minute, there's a picture of a doll that's kind of chilling out somewhere. That's different.
yeah. Well, that's my next post is going to be a Trump post, but
Oh, God. I'll just block you now.
it's different. Are you voting Trump?
I am voting none of the above. That's my philosophy right now.
Okay. Thank you.
That may change between now and November, but right now it's none of the above.
Okay.
Brewster
I'll
Williams.
elaborate more in my Facebook post.
Put it this way, I would love to see that neither person win, and within the Congress will decide who gets to be president.
Yeah. Well,
Like Paul Ryan or something, because he'll be the guy to make the decision.
right. I mean, I'm usually pretty apathetic, but not in this one. I don't care if Hillary does win, but I do. Trump cannot win. Cannot represent.
Your neighbors may not agree with you.
No, dude. Did you see? There was something on the news that Bucks County is like one of like the 4 counties in the United States that is going to decide the election.
Yes, they said that. Yep, it's actually my district.
Yes, it's our district.
Which is, yeah, no. Are you part of that same district? I guess you
Not the
probably
same
are.
one, but yeah, it's.
I think
yeah.
it's 13 or something. I don't know. It's
Oh, it might
it's sort
be
of
13, actually.
it's Ben Salem and Bristol area and
Yeah.
that part of Montgomery County. It's a weird one. It's changed over the years.
Yeah.
No, it's unknown.
Yeah, you and I are going to decide the election, so it's very relieving that you're not
So-
voting for Trump.
I just said none of the above.
I don't care. As long as you're not voting for Trump, I don't care who you vote for.
Can I just vote for Pence then?
Yeah.
Right in somebody else.
Yeah, right.
I thought I scheduled this.
This way, I don't see any of the candidates represent my view of the world.
No, right. I rarely do.
Small government,
Yeah. I agree.
low taxes.
I rarely do, but I'm generally apathetic about it. But not this time, man. That's because it goes for me. It goes beyond politics. This is like basic human decency.
It's the devil or the devil's master,
Yeah.
which is pretty scary because when you think about it, we went through a big long process, and this is sort of where we ended up.
Yep. I know. I know.
I look at it this way. There's going to be no hanging chads this time, so.
I know, just hacked voting machines.
Yeah, that's over it.
We live in a society where Mr. Robot is popular, so
Yes, exactly. I actually have. There's a book on that whole idea of hacking the election.
yeah, sure.
We're done. You can write whatever you want. All right, I think I'm gonna go and guess.
All right, did you uploaded?
Yeah, I'll upload it right now.
I might try and stitch this together right now.
God. All right, see you guys.
All right, see ya.
Yeah, let me check.